Hey, everyone. It's Isaya. Welcome. Let me get this image out of the way. Welcome. This is Things Women Don't Talk About, my new-ish podcast series. And today I am, let me get this thing in order. So I'm going to introduce, for those of you who don't remember, the series. So it's a kind of newish series. I've started last year, but I had to stop for a while. And it's a conversation with a guest around topics that are seldom discussed, whether they are too difficult or some taboo, or they're not too serious enough to be broadcasted. It can be mundane, it can be sacred, it can be dark or light, it can be fun or taboo. But basically, it's mostly things that are seldom discussed on the web, basically. So today I have a special guest. I have my very good friend Fiona Morris. Fiona is a herbalist, holistic therapist, and astro tarot reader. She helps folks by creatively harnessing the power of nature to heal and exploring the dynamics of life through the ancient arts and science of astrology and tarot, or tarot, whichever you want to pronounce it. And do you want to add something to your bio, Fiona?
I think that covers it.
welcome. I'm really happy that you're here. I want to just let people know how we ended up with this subject, because it's kind of, we were discussing, and I thought, hey, I was on Fiona's podcast a few months back, and I thought, hey, I'll invite Fiona, and I'm sure we'll find us a topic. And we were, something around the tarot, and then when I said the dark cards, your face just lit. It was like, hey, this is exactly perfect. So today we are talking about the so-called dark or difficult cards of the tarot deck. What are they? How to read them? Why not to fear them? And the first thing I want to say is why it came up for me was because when I started working with the tarot, and I'm not a tarot specialist as much as you are, but I still kind of play along with it quite more and more. When I started working with the tarot, what surprised me was how many people I could find who are either tarologists or tarot readers or even tarot deck creators who literally get rid of any so-called difficult cards. I mean, there are decks where some cards are just completely vanished. And it blows my mind. I mean, this thing, the tarot, for those of you who don't know, is at least 7,000 years old. You can't just go around saying, hey, let me get rid of 20 cards that I don't like in this deck and change them with something more fluffy and smiley. And it for me, it really called around, there's a fear. There's a fear of these cards.
Yeah.
And when I first started reading, I had this fear of, oh my God, what if I pull the death card? Or, what am I going to say to people if their card is the death card? So I'm really interested to hear your take around this and, what you think about that.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, for having me on. It's lovely to be invited to your show. And yes, I mean, it might be surprising to some that my face might light up at the sound of the dark and challenging tarot cards, but I've been reading for about 25 years now, and quite early on, I had to tackle the dark cards because, of course, they come up. And when I first got into tarot, I was literally just doing it out of curiosity. I'd seen a pack of cards in a bookshop and a book to teach yourself, and I was thinking, oh, you can actually learn about this. It's in an easy. I think it was called Tarot Made Easy. It was super. It was literally very easy. It just jumped out. It was obviously my time to learn, and I initially I was just experimenting on my neighbors, my flatmates, and I was as surprised as they were when their reactions to what came up was surprisingly, how would I describe it? In some ways, their emotions would alter, and that's what I noticed first and foremost was what started off as just a bit of fun. Actually, I very quickly realized gets you to the heart of what is going on in your heart. And
Absolutely.
I like to call it the mirror of your heart. So it's when we're doing a tarot reading, the way I see it is that we're literally putting your cards on the table, reflecting back what is in your heart at that time. And of course, that can be a mixture of things. We aren't thinking about rainbows and unicorns every day, rarely, in fact, for very long, because life is challenging. And what I love, or I've come to love about the tarot, is that it shows us the full spectrum, the good, bad, and the
Yeah.
ugly. And so, yes, a lot of people um, will take out the negative cards because they're not ready, perhaps, to have that conversation with people. It feels too challenging and tricky. But for me, I have found it very empowering
Yeah.
to
I
learn how
agree.
to work with these cards. And it's not something that comes straight away. So I understand why people might have the urge to do that. They might be drawn by the magic and mysticism of tarot, and yet the threat of some of these darker cards popping up in a reading can be quite scary. But I feel that we are doing ourselves and people who we're reading for a huge disservice if we remove those cards, because
I agree.
if we call ourselves a holistic healer, which I consider myself holistic in the way I work, that means to look at all aspects. And
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think, it's like I studied psychotherapy for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. The
Mm-hmm.
burying the dark emotions and not
Yes.
talking about them will not make them disappear.
No.
So I think for the tarot deck, it's exactly the same thing. If we
Mm-hmm.
just, kind of pretend they don't exist, or pretend that shit doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
in our lives, we're just depriving ourselves of a solution to the shit, because
Yeah.
that's what also is contained in those challenging dark cards, is the way out, basically,
Indeed.
or an idea or a suggestion that can, how you can harness the dark energy. For me, the first card I want to mention, if we're going to go into details, is the Tower
Mm-hmm.
card. So I have a few cards for those of us who are watching this or will be watching the video. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
showing some cards. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, tough luck, guys. Sorry. I'll be using the Lights Heroes tarot deck from the amazing Chrisanne. If you have cards, you're welcome to share them as well, Fiona.
Would you?
So yeah, the first card that I want to mention is the Tower card, because it's like
Mm.
it's immediately oh my god, chaos.
Yeah.
And how do I say to people, it's chaos coming,
Yeah.
but in the chaos lies the seed for the new thing. In the destruction of the old is the space for the new thing. And oh, oh, sorry, some tech issues. Here we are.
And
Sorry,
we're
for some reason, for some reason it decided to kick you out. I don't know
back.
why.
The tower,
Sorry.
the lightning struck at that very
Yeah,
moment as we're
exactly.
talking about the tower. Yeah.
So yeah, this is one typical example for me of a card that cannot be ignored,
Mm-hmm.
and that contains its own reverse positive side, or solution, which is,
Mm-hmm.
in the chaos of the destruction of the tower lies the empty space for the new to come. If I
Absolutely.
don't make some space, there is no room. um I just want to, before we go into each card or some of the cards, I just wanted
Hmm.
uh I don't remember. Oh, I don't remember. You go, because I've lost
Okay.
my train of thoughts with.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm sure it'll come back to you. So yeah, I've got with me. I'm on my travels at the moment. I'm in Thailand, so I've only got 2 packs of card out of way too many that I don't even know how many I've got. So it's actually
I
quite
know the feeling.
um, it's 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 good to be traveling with only 2 cards because it focuses the mind. So for me right now, I'm working with the Wild Unknown. So this is the tarot card from the Wild Unknown, as you can see, similar to the Rider Waite card, which I
Yeah,
kind of use the Rider Waite. It was the first deck that I learned, that I got. And so it's the very traditional, quite classical images of the tarot. And so in my mind, I often kind of flip back to those cards and compare it with the more modern decks that have come out. And so this is a very modern representation of tarot. And here it's simply a tall tree that has been struck by lightning. And the top of the tree has been struck in 2 places, and it's bringing it down, bringing the top down. And it's reminding me of the traditional one where there's a crown, an image of the crown on top of a tall tower, and it's a storm has come, and there's people falling out the windows, and it's a sign of um sudden, as you say, chaos, of destruction, of everything that you've built, everything that you thought was safe and sacred, comes crumbling to the ground in a moment. And it could be something that you've been working on for years, centuries, even. It's the sign of things that are overdue being brought back down to the ground, and
yeah.
as you say, creating the space for new new life to grow. But it's a traumatic card. What I love about this
It can
card,
be, but it
yeah,
can be. But at the same time, for me, it's also a card that means at last old structures will die.
yes, yes,
So it's a very
all structures
optimistic
will
card,
die.
also.
Yeah,
You know,
and I think, yeah, I think with when we go through these types of experiences, there is a lot of attachment. I mean, if
yeah,
a flood comes to out of nowhere, you've lived peacefully in a home for 30 plus years, and suddenly a flood unexpectedly comes and takes all of your most precious belongings. It's You'd have to be a very enlightened person to not find that
yeah,
difficult. It's a destructive card, so let's not sugarcoat it. And yet it's exciting, it's exhilarating,
yeah,
it does create opportunity for something new. It may not be something that you've chosen, and yet it's almost like they call it an act of God, don't they, in
yeah.
all these
Hmm.
insurance kind of documents. These things that you couldn't have predicted for sometimes do happen, and that's a
Hmm.
tarot card. And I love that you chose this one first, because this was probably the first dark card that I really got a grips with. And to me, it represents when I first went traveling, age 19, before I even got into tarot. um, the first week I got there, I didn't have a lot of savings, but I lost it all immediately.
Oh my
I
God.
left my wallet on top of a phone, and suddenly, and so to me, that was my tower moment. I mean, it wasn't even that much money, obviously, relatively. At the time, it was everything I had, and so to me, that was my whole world suddenly gone. And I remember just crying and thinking, right, my parents were right, I shouldn't have gone traveling.
Mhm.
All of this. And it was the foundation for this amazing adventure of humility. I had to humble myself,
Yeah,
and I think that's what the tower brings, is an opportunity to be humbled. And no, people
yeah,
rarely ask for an opportunity to humble,
yeah.
um,
I agree.
but it is
I
about your
agree, but they
ego being
happen.
deconstructed,
I agree, but
and
they happen. The
they
humbling
do happen.
experiences, they
Yeah,
happen, and I think that just trying to pretend they don't would
yeah,
would mean that the tarot deck would be poorer. for that,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and trying to
Yeah.
pretend that there are just positive experiences
Yeah.
would be, yeah, it's a shame, you know. I
I
found
think
out
it's
my train of
reassuring.
thought.
Oh yes. Yes.
I found out my
Well,
train of thought, and my train of thought is as is. For me, the tarot
mhm,
deck, and again, I'm not the big specialist you are, and maybe you're going to be disagreeing with me, but for me, it's
mhm,
not so much a predictive tool. So it's not,
mhm,
hey, you're going to
mhm.
meet this tall, dark, and handsome guy, and you're going
Yeah.
to fall in love and have 3 kids, point
Yeah.
5, and you know, it's about the energy
Yeah.
that is around for you to harness in your
Mhm.
life, or that, you know, that might happen, but not as specific facts. And I
Yeah.
guess that is why some people fear some of the cards in
Mhm.
the tarot deck. It's
Mhm.
because if
Yeah.
you go for predictive tarot, then of
Yeah.
course, if you pull the tower for someone or the death card, it's like, oh, who's
Mhm.
dying? Basically,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
if we go for an energetic vibratory, do you say vibratory, um
Mhm.
uh, and what is
Vibrational.
in your heart, vibrational, yeah,
Mhm.
sorry. What is in your heart way of using the tarot deck, then the cards become way less frightening, and
Yes.
open up to the conversation that we were having before. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the top of the podcast, but you know, my
That's
head,
okay.
it's morning for me.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you because I don't read cards in a predictive way either. But that being said, I will pull cards and place them in positions that represent past, future,
Yeah.
sometimes distant past, um, and uh, but I don't think of them as fortune telling. I don't actually like the term
Yeah.
fortune telling. I find it outdated and it's not how I work. Perhaps other tarot readers do. Um, but the way I like to look at tarot is that we're bringing everything into the present moment. And
Hmm.
so the cards that are placed in the future point are potential.
Yeah.
It's energy to consider. And if you think about all the 72 cards in the tarot, or 78, I've momentarily forgotten the exact number, um, uh, that we are going to experience every single card
Yeah.
at some point in
At
our
some point.
lives, to greater or lesser extents. And so, yeah, I found it a great gift to being presented with these images and to actually dive really deeply into the most challenging ones, knowing that they're the ones that are hard to work with or hard that bring up the most tender emotions in
Yeah.
people. And I think giving people a safe space to allow whether they choose to reflect on it or talk on it is it's palpable how people's energy shifts when you touch on these dark
Hmm.
aspects, because it's
Yeah.
almost like they're feeling seen in
Yeah.
a sort of magical way. And they don't even need to say to me that what it is. Sometimes people do, but I can feel when there's a sort of emotional welling and allowing, sometimes a glassy eyed appearance where something that people don't even want to acknowledge, maybe have rarely spoken about to the nearest and dearest. Suddenly, a stranger comes out with it, the energetics of it, and just hearing that story through another person's perspective can give them,
Yeah.
um, yeah, just something to
The
work
space.
with.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the space for that to
Absolutely.
heal and transmute.
So, which is your next favorite dark or challenging card?
Yeah, well, you certainly touched on my favorite straight away. So let's see. I've picked out my top three that I think are the most challenging, or I've found in clients that I've worked with. Oh, actually, before we move on from the tower, I just want to show you the card in the gentle tarot. People who are listening to the audio might not be able to see it, but it's somebody sitting on top of a hill. There's raging waves, there's fire, there's lightning striking, but the person sat at
Wow.
the top is sat in this meditation posture and is completely unfazed by the external drama and chaos and whirlwinds.
That's
Literally
interesting. Yeah.
everything. And this pack is called the Gentle Tarot. So even though we're talking about the dark cards, there are decks which do give these alternative ways of describing that energy. And so, yeah, even I wouldn't want to pull out this card. I wouldn't consider this a bad card in
Mm,
bad. Yeah, it's an interesting word, the good and the bad cards,
yeah.
because I think sometimes the opposite is true. If you've got too much of the so-called good cards, that is just a recipe for very slow spiritual growth, and not a lot going on, just a bit of a bland experience
Yeah.
all around.
Hmm.
Whereas here, this person is alive. I mean, the
Finding
environment is
balance amidst the chaos.
absolutely, and so that is our challenge,
Yeah.
when we get this card, is to find that place within us that doesn't get moved
Yeah.
by even the biggest storms. Okay, so and on to the next one. So let's go directly to death, shall we?
Let's.
um, so I've, yeah, and my two. I mean, you might want to show yours first, but
Yeah, I want to show
my
mine because
yeah, you share
mine is a
yours. Yeah.
non-traditional one. Uh,
Okay.
and Chris Ann decided to call it Death and Rebirth. So
Mm,
it's got the two
mhm.
words in there. And for me,
Yeah,
and in the middle is I don't know if you can
that's
see,
nice.
a little infinity symbol.
I love that.
So
Yes.
for me, it's really transparent or so clear
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
is in this card with this visual representation. It's
Mhm.
something that, again, like with the tower, minus the drama, there
Mhm.
is something needs to die for something
Yeah.
else to be born.
Yeah.
And so it's again about letting go, about
Mhm.
allowing for things to that are finished to
Yeah.
leave,
Yeah.
and to be kind of recycled into
Mm.
the earth or something. And yeah, it means death, but it doesn't mean I'm dying or somebody else is dying.
Yeah.
It means death of ideas, of beliefs, of circumstances, objects, things that tie us down to the past when in fact we're ready for the future.
Yes. And yeah, for me, it actually brings up another subject that is challenging in the tarot for me, because I've drawn this card twice in the past few weeks, in fact, for myself. And the second time it came up, it was reversed. And I know that this reverse cards is another thing that many tarot readers choose not to read, and that's fine, each to their own. But I I I feel that they give the tarot a nuance that, or it gives the readings of the card a nuance that you don't get if you don't do the reverse cards. And so for me, reverse cards will very much depend on what the card is and the surrounding cards. So I can't say this card reversed means that. It's not like that. You kind of have to always read the cards in the context. Um, but for me, I pulled the reversed death card, and I have been going through a long, slow process of watching or witnessing my father at the end of his life. And he's still with us, but he's very definitely in this at-home palliative care
Hmm.
um, situation, and I've been with my parents for the past year and a half now, a lot longer than the original 3 months than I expected.
Hmm.
And so I honestly thought he was going to die quite soon after I arrived. And it ended up being quite prolonged. So for me, when you get a reversed card, oftentimes it shows either resistance to the energy of that card. And so
Hmm.
for me, I was interpreting that as certainly my experience of my dad passing is that there's a resistance to letting go of life, even though
Obviously.
his quality of life is not great at all. And I think other people in his situation would happily let go of life, and yet we never know when we're at that mysterious point in our lives, like
No.
how we will feel. And so that's one way of interpreting. And there, it can't. And even though people say, well, shy away from actual death, people do have loved ones who die,
Yes.
and so it can be a huge relief sometimes when death comes up, because it gives people the space to kind of acknowledge that, yes, there's grief, yes, there's been
Yeah.
huge loss, and this is a space where we can see that and acknowledge the feelings that have come up around it. And so, yeah, we definitely live in a culture where talking about death is not the norm. It's definitely a taboo. So one for your series, I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
find more people to talk about that subject. However, let me show you this fact. First of all, I'll show you the card in the wild unknown, because this is a pretty gruesome image. It's a
Oh yeah.
carcass of a bird, and it's dark. It's black behind, and it's pretty blunt. This card.
Yep.
It's decay. It's, you know, the flesh of this bird is completely gone. All that's left is the
The
solid.
bone. Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
bones are all that's left, and it's a very graphic image of the starkness of things coming to an end. It is about endings, death. However, in this card, the Gentle Tarot, the way is a bit more like Chris and Lightseer's way of describing it, of this hermit crab in this death card is grown too big for its shell, and he's just spotted a shiny new one, which has got all these little expression marks over it, looking all shiny, and so he's ready to make that leap into a new shell, a new kind
Yeah.
of reality, living an upgrade, shall we say. So, you know, I love this way of looking at death, because it's, you know, and in the same way, you know, we have all sorts of different beliefs about what lies beyond. And so, even though there are people left behind who grieve a loss, um, the soul is going to the wild unknown,
Yeah.
and in many ways, many people do believe that it is some form of upgrade. So yeah, I think death is a
No,
very
I think it's
positive
yeah.
card.
Yeah, death
Yeah.
is just something that is part of life, weirdly enough,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that, you know, again, trying to ignore it or banish it or make it disappear is
Mhm.
not going to help anyone.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, facing it and of course we can fear it, but
Mhm.
let's not fear the meaning of the card, you know,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think it's one, obviously it's one of the most, let's put it this way, frightening ones, and that's why
Yeah.
it's so, you know, even the word death is, as you were saying, taboo. So basically,
Mhm. Yeah.
so what next?
What next?
What's next?
Shall I tell you what my third one is in my lineup
Yes,
of
yeah,
top three?
you said you had three, so
Yeah.
oh, the third one.
So I don't know if this matches with your top three,
Oh, we'll
but
see.
I have chosen the devil card as
Yeah, I
another
was going for the devil as well.
yeah, the top three cards that are most feared of the tarot. So yeah, let's have a look at your card and get your take
So
on
yeah,
it.
again, my deck is a very modern one. Well, the deck that I'm using is a very
Mm-hmm.
modern one. It's the Lightseer's Tarot deck by Chrisanne, and here comes the devil. One of the tricks in this tarot deck
Mm-hmm.
is that all the guys and the ladies are so freaking handsome, so you can fall in love with paper people, which I love. And
Yeah.
the devil is actually so attractive. And that for me makes exactly the case of that, why this card is challenging. But if you look
Okay.
at it closely, and I'm going to go like this, you can see that he's a puppeteer and the
Uh-huh.
person here. So this, you know, if you just look at the upper parts, like, hey, come and play with me, and then you realize
Mm-hmm.
that he's actually manipulating, basically.
Yes.
And for
Yes.
me, to be honest, of the three cards that we've discussed, so the Tower, the Death, and the
Mm-hmm.
Devil is the one that I not fear, but I consider the most challenging for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I have to read the devil, because it means that I will have to go and say to people things that they don't want to hear.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which is that they are partly responsible of letting themselves
Mm-hmm.
be manipulated by
Mm-hmm.
handsome exterior circumstances, whether people or substances or, And this is something that most people don't want to hear.
Yeah.
For
The
me,
positive side, though, of the devil is that it can be quite a sexy card. It can
absolutely.
be very pleasurable and all the sort of attractive things that are a bit naughty.
Yeah,
And so it
yeah,
can be quite good fun, shall we say. However, it is where we keep ourselves small and where
yeah,
we keep ourselves trapped, and it can be, we can get this, it's like a comfort zone that we get stuck in,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
And so it can be so hard to leave. Let me show you the image
Oh
in
yeah.
the gentle tarot that I've got here. So it's quite hard to see because it's a very dark image,
Hmm.
but it shows somebody who's coming out of a dark room, out, and you can see that the little red
Hmm.
footprint, trying to escape, trying to get out, but he or she is holding a chain, but he or she is not chained, actually physically chained. The
Hmm. No,
person's
he's holding the chain.
holding the chain, and so
That's
this
what that's why
person,
I was saying that it's
yeah,
challenging to read for people, because that
yeah,
the place where you have to tell people you are
yeah,
holding the chain, just let it
yeah.
go if you don't want it.
This
Um,
card actually came up for me. In fact, it was the one from the other deck I've got with me, the Wild Unknown, which shows a goat,
oh yeah, another goat.
a
Yeah.
horny goat with his fiery hooves, and he's also got a pentacle, a reverse pentacle,
Oh
and this
yeah,
is
this
one of
one's
the
got a
things
pentacle
about,
too.
yes, yes, interesting. Um, that I mean, I think a lot of some religious people struggle with the tarot
Yeah,
because,
because of the
especially of
devil.
this card, because the
Yeah,
devil, I mean, the devil is in the Bible. I mean, it's,
yeah,
if the devil can be featured in the Bible, why not in the tarot? It encapsulates the totality of life, including our addictions, our vulnerabilities, the places that we um, make us feel, it's a false sense of power.
yeah,
um, and it's just, I would say this is like an initiation of making powerful choices and an invitation to step into maturity. I can see some
hmm.
comments here from
Yes,
Trudy.
Trudy's there, and she says
Clearly a fan
life would be
of the
boring
devil.
without the devil.
It certainly would be boring. It certainly would be boring.
Plus, for me, there's always this invitation that is really, really powerful with the devil card. It's that
Mm,
when we agree to see that place where we hold the chain, where we keep ourselves small,
mhm.
this is an extraordinary opportunity for healing. In this
Absolutely.
darkness, in this dark place, when we face that we are
Yeah.
doing that to
Yeah.
ourselves, basically,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that there is no devil, or the devil
Yes.
is part of me, this
Mhm.
is this extraordinary opportunity for healing that
Mm,
no other card in the tarot deck or no other circumstance will
yes.
provide. And so it's like this opening up of the, for me it's very linked, but that's my personal obsessions with the
Mhm.
crone energy, the energy
Mhm.
of the crone, which means that the energy that we, the permission that we give ourselves to go deep into the darkness, into the
Mhm.
stillness, and face the crap and
Yes.
just sit with it until we let it go and we heal it.
Yeah.
And the more we resist going in there, the more we
Mhm.
resist going in the darkness, the less we heal, basically. Because
Yeah.
again, it's not all unicorns. We have very, very often some shit hidden in the darkness,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And I would say my personal experience with the devil recently, again, this is a card that has come up in my reading, and I was slightly taken aback when it came up. I I have this kind of affirmation that I say to myself, is that I love working with the dark cards. And it's something that I've said for a long time because I want to be ready when they come up. And I've kind of created this mindset, I suppose, of really being able to support people when they're going through that type of energy, and myself, of course, which feels really empowering. But I must say, when it came up, I was like, I what is it? And I think that there's this kind of spiritual ignorance sometimes, or like when we feel like we've done a lot of work on ourselves or we've grown in various ways, and then the devil comes up. And I was thinking, I've given up all the vices that I used to indulge in. What could it possibly be this time? And I have to say, we never quite, as long as we're human, we're never perfect.
No.
And so I had to do a bit of digging. So I think wherever the devil turns up, there's also this stubborn ignorance. There's something that you're clinging to that's keeping you small, and it can become more and more and more subtle. Is my personal experience of it. So it may not be giving up cigarettes and alcohol, which I fortunately have given up a long time ago now. But for me, my vices are more subtle. It's like, where is my attention
Yeah.
coming away from my path? And other things. I have to say, honestly, social media sucks me in. I can go down rabbit holes. I'm sure most people maybe watching this or maybe on social media right now can relate. Yeah, I
Yeah,
struggle.
I agree with what Trudy is writing in the. I'm going to read it for the people who will not have the things.
Yeah,
She says that's where we put all our crap, in the dark, where it can feed and grow, and we need to look that shit in the eye. So
yeah.
it's literally how the devil is offering this, extending this invitation,
Mm-hmm.
to go into the darkness.
Yeah,
And I think it would be such a shame if this car didn't exist, or if it would
yeah,
be replaced by something,
yeah,
happier or something like that. So yeah, I agree. These are the three big ones.
yeah.
And then I personally have an amazing
Mm-hmm.
love for a whole suit of the tarot that is usually
Uh-huh.
considered,
Yeah,
forget it. Oh no, I don't
yeah,
want those.
yeah,
I love the
yeah.
swords,
Yes, of
whatever
course
they're
you had to bring
called.
up the sword. Yes.
We could go for some other cards, but we won't have that time. So
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask you whether you
Yes,
agree with me that the swords cards are so unloved, and
absolutely.
usually so, uh, you know,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah,
it's like, oh
heart-wrenching.
my God, they're all dark and unhappy
Yeah, yeah.
um, and sad and for
Yes.
me, it's really interesting that the swords are connected with the air element
Mhm. Mhm.
and with everything that is of our mind, of the
Yes.
thoughts. And
Yes.
so that goes with the absence of love in today's spiritual word
Mhm.
for the what we can call the mind. We have to
Mhm.
silence the mind, which I strongly
Mm.
disagree. I mean, we can't
Yes.
just silence parts of us.
No.
Maybe it's not a good idea to have it overtake the whole of our life. We need
Mhm.
emotions, we need soul, we need body, but
Yes.
mind we do need. And the idea that we need to that we should be silencing it goes for me very well with the idea that we hate the swords cards.
Yes.
And again, it makes no sense. We can't just decide that some bits of it
Yes.
are should be put aside. It's like, for me, the tarot deck is a whole. It can be a whole representation of life, and it
Mhm.
can include all aspects of ourselves. And holistic, as you were saying,
Mm.
means that we don't cut ourselves into
Yeah.
pieces, and we
Yes.
can't just make things disappear.
Yeah.
um
And I think that word that you just used, cut into pieces, is very relevant for the swords, because the sword is sharp, it's metal, it's cold, it's hard, it can hurt. And so it is, when we get the swords, and oftentimes the imagery is not pleasant. So when we see it, of course, we want life to feel good. We enjoy things that feel good, but we have to acknowledge that life doesn't always feel good. And I think, um, yeah, a lot, a bit like the image in the tarot card, where there's this serene person in the midst of the storms. I think the swords can also teach us that very powerfully, that a lot of the things that make us suffer are appearances to our mind. They're our mindset constructions that we can learn to reframe. We can choose new ways of thinking. We can find that peace within the storm. And basically, the entire suit of swords is a
I
stormy
agree.
suit, isn't it? But the power of the mind also is discerning. It's cool. It's can be emotionally detached in a good way. I mean, people always think, oh well, they lack in emotions, the air element card. And yes, they are the scientists, they are the logicians.
For me, that
There's
the
intellect.
I'm a goddess person,
Yes.
and I work with the Greek goddesses, and the swords are highly connected with Athena, goddess Athena, who is absolutely emotionless, but
Yes.
that's where her power lies.
Yes.
you know
Yes.
and it
Yes.
doesn't mean that we have to be emotionless all the time, but if you look at this card, for instance, which for me is
Yes.
really a beautiful representation of Athena. She's the Queen of
Yes.
Swords in this deck. It's like,
Yeah.
obviously, yes, at sometimes in our lives the
Yeah.
call for emotionless is a
Yeah.
big one,
Yes.
to be rational about it, to
Yes.
have a serious good look at our life and consider it. Do
Yeah.
I actually agree with what my life looks like at this minute? And the
Yes.
swords very often come to ask those questions. Do I agree
Yeah.
with myself? Am I trusting myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I think good of myself?
And I
And
think it's yeah.
again,
And
double checking with ourselves is
mhm.
is a very beautiful and powerful invitation.
Yeah, and as a tarot reader, we can often present as the Queen of Swords, like you say, when say the Devil card comes up, and you're having to tell some harsh reality truths.
Yeah.
But of course, we're not going to necessarily be as blunt as the Queen of Swords when we
We
put
don't
them
have to.
across. We can have compassion, we can have skill, and I think part of mastering the element of swords, which is about communication and the use of the mind and our intellect, is to be able to use our words wisely and maybe draw on some of the other elements like
Yeah.
the water and the earth in times like that when we need to put across a message which is hard to hear in a way that can be heard, and that's the challenge as a tarot reader.
Absolutely, but that's
Yeah,
also the fun,
absolutely. Yeah,
because we get to help people face their crap
yeah,
and get out of it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
get out, and that's the big part. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
that will have to be kind of our conclusion,
Mm.
if that's all
Mm-hmm.
right with you, unless you want to add
Of
something.
course.
This is the power of the dark cards, or the challenging
Yeah,
cards. It's that we,
yeah,
as tarot readers, or even you, if you read tarot for yourself,
yeah.
we get to find the way
Mm-hmm.
out. But you cannot find the way
Mm-hmm.
out until you recognize that you're trapped somewhere. So you need
Yes,
to first
actually,
be in there.
Isaiah, there is one very quick thing I'd like to mention, which is this card here, the Sun, which isn't a dark card. It's a bright card, the brightest card of the entire
It
tarot
is.
deck, and it reminds me of that quotation by Marianne Williamson, which goes something to the effect of, "It's not our darkness that we're most afraid of; it's our light." And actually, I never want to make assumptions when I'm reading for the tarot, because what might be a hard card for me may be a walk in the park for some people, and likewise some of the so-called great cards, the happy clappy cards like the Sun, which is all about youth and vitality and growth, can be quite hard for some people to bear, because shining in their light and being their best, boldest, most divine self is a challenge. It's hard work.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just put that in there because
Yeah, that's
um
really, thank you. That's really beautiful to
yeah,
remember that,
yeah,
sometimes we are
yeah,
indeed very much afraid of our light. And
yeah.
so, of
And the
course,
sun
we've
casts a
just,
big shadow. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm, mm.
But yeah, thank you. It was
A
amazing,
pleasure.
very much too short. Uh, we have so many mentioned. We could have gone deep
Absolutely.
into the swords card. We could have talked about the moon, which is one of the blurry cards,
I had that.
or the five of cups,
Yeah,
or justice, or the
indeed.
hermit, or so many cards. And maybe we'll do someday. If you guys are interested in more, in finding more about Fiona, you will find her website in the description video, or the podcast if you're listening, her group, her Facebook. So I'm going to say the name of your website, although it's easier to read it. So Fiona, sorry, I need to open it. FionaMorrisHerbalist.co.uk, and you will find something amazing that she does. And I'm really, really honored to talked with me, little tarot beginner, compared to your 20 years of experience. And yeah, I wish you all the success. You guys, if you want to work with the tarot or with herbs, don't hesitate. Fiona is amazing, and she is a light in under the sun. Let me put it this way. Thank you very, very much. I will see you in some other live stream somewhere. And my next guest in January should be Trudy Mallins, and we don't know what we're talking about. See you then. Bye for now. Bye, Fiona.
Bye-bye.